Europe, and we have Tim at home who's on 80%. You know, like
Right.
he's on 80%. Probably there's 20% that he could work it out, and Glenn will salvage what was kind of his trajectory within the band. And it didn't work out that way. It just didn't work out that way. He had a different idea, and a couple moments were just, you know, like the one that I think is fair to mention is just we were given an opportunity for a sound check. The show was fucking great. It was somewhere in Germany. I can't remember the venue, but it had a bunch of vintage things in there, like cars and the Rock Shop or something.
Fabrik, Ludwigsburg.
That's it.
Ludwigsburg, Rock Fabrik.
Crowds go, screaming "Forbidden."
Mm-hmm.
We'd only felt that for the first time when we played in Paris, France, which was insane. Where they started before we walked out and after we were done. Never heard that in our lives. We'd only played in Philadelphia for the Ultimate Revenge
Europe.
and L.A. for a few shows with Dark Angel or fucking, So we didn't ever hear that. So the crowd was going off, and we're upstairs, and Debbie's all right, everybody go down, and Glenn's no, I'm not going. And we're like, what do you mean you're not going? He said, I'm not going. I don't feel like it. So he wasn't having a great night. He wasn't feeling it. But, when things are already on a delicate bounds, and that moment, it really, really angered a couple guys in the band, myself included, and Debbie basically said, fuck, that's it.
Well, because this is kind of like your swan song. People are finally chanting your name.
Yeah, you're finally arriving.
You're going down to meet them. This adulation that you've been wanting forever and been working so hard for, and now it's right at your fingertips.
Yeah, it just showed a blatant disregard for the moment itself. And to Glenn's defense, and I can't get inside his head. And we've already, we've gone our separate ways, come back, and gone our separate ways, and come back. And this is what we, old friends do. But to his defense, I don't really know if it was just a bad day, if it was, that he just wasn't feeling the show. But it was the moment where we said, Debbie said, call your friend at home with the funny hair. Because Tim had that puffy hair.
Tim's little wiry kind of Frankie Pro.
Yeah, it's just the only way his hair would go.
Right.
So it would only go out,
Right. Well, then it dropped after it got long.
Yeah.
A little bit.
Little bit of hair product.
Yes,
product.
Product helps everything.
So, she's a fuck him, basically, like that was one thing about Debbie when she got mad. It's fuck him.
Yeah.
Fuck him. She said fuck him about 4 or 5 times on that tour.
Wow.
And that was the last one. And,
Yeah, because I remember you guys were starting with us, I believe we had just gotten off a Headbangers Ball tour with Anthrax and Halloween. And our next thing we were doing was the headlining for Fabulous Disaster.
We were hearing that was going to be the tour we were on. Right. When we were in Europe, we were hearing.
Yes.
But this is the same tour where Paul broke his arm. This is the same tour where Paul broke his arm, and the rumor was that he broke it moving gear. But he didn't. He broke it punching a wall because somebody said something to him that pissed him off. Oh. And I wasn't around for it to happen. I was out I had bad strep throat. I got tour aids, as they say, before that was ever a thing. It was bad. And so I come back from going to the doctor and getting my antibiotics, and everyone's like, why the long face, man? I'm like, what's going on? I'm like, why is everyone look upset? And so I can't remember who says the tour's probably off. I'm like, what do you mean? Well, Paul punched a wall. I'm like, what the fuck? So what happened, So I finally get him here. And before you say anything, dude, just don't fucking say anything. He's all, I'm going to play.
And he did.
Well,
one-handed, I remember.
This is all the night before the show. And so he we're like, no way. And then we get to the fucking venue, and, everyone's really stressed. And what are you going to do? Professor Bostaff is already thinking in his head what he's going to do. And he was probably the first guy. He was like very Rick Allen about it. But all he had was 2 kicks, and this set with the cymbals are way too high that he used to roll with, which is, if you remember back in the old days, they were way up here. And that caused shoulder issues, forearm issues, things that Paul's had many things. As we know, he almost retired.
Right.
Because of that ball of tendon and muscle that pulled, and calcium, and it was nasty. But anyway, fucking A, sound check. We get through a couple songs. He just does more double bass. He just figures out a way to do the fills. So that was the legacy of Paul. Paul was always a good drummer with people before. Paul was always he was bombastic. People thought he was pretty good. But once everyone heard about the one-armed drummer, that was where the legacy of Paul became real.
We were watching him every night.
You got, yeah. So we finished that fucking tour, and we don't have very long. We don't have very long at all. And we talked to Glenn the next day, and we go down to our studio. We're all meeting there, and we tell him, and he got really upset. And I know he knew. There's no doubt he knew, but he decided to walk home by himself, and it was like miles. We're like, you don't want to rise? Oh no, fuck that! And he just like walked away.
Wow.
So, that was so. Immediately went to work with Tim. And Glenn and Tim had been in the same room together a few times. Tim had gone with us to L.A. and when we played with Dark Angel, Tim had he was roadieing for me. We weren't exactly forthright about who he was and what our intentions were, but that's just kids being kids. There,
That's amazing.
We had to cover our asses, as I explained.
wild.
So that was a tumultuous time because we had to kind of do what we had to do to cover our asses, and so Tim was pretty well prepared. So happens he had to be because we had a show the very fucking next week. We had a headlining show at home after the tour. So Tim and I immediately got to work where he learned the rest of the set, like really got it down. We were practicing each night, and we wrote a guitar solo together. We actually did a live solo. If you were at that show, I don't know if you were or not, but we did a dual thing. No one had done that out of our bunch. We had harmonized everything.
Really, I don't remember that.
Yeah. We stopped doing. We didn't do any solos after that. We didn't do it. Yeah. He was still better than me, but in his way, he always was a step ahead of everybody because Tim was like writing movie soundtracks. You got your movie shirt on.
Yeah.
That's what I see when I hear a lot of what Tim wrote. And what was great about him and I writing together is he had no real knowledge or back pocket of thrash metal either. He was Queensryche and more dramatic stuff.
Power metal, more power.
Somewhat. I guess Queensryche at the time, I mean, he liked heavy metal. He didn't like power metal. That was cheesy to him. He liked Queensryche because they wrote songs. Again, so here's what I had. That was the first time since Rob that song became first again. Because with Rob, he was writing songs too. With Glenn, he'd write riffs. We'd fit a riff in here and there, but the songs were being written by mostly Paul and myself, and then Russ do vocals. But we'd always write. He did write some epic riffs for us, dude. Don't get me wrong, but they weren't songs. They were never like. So with Tim, all of a sudden I had like, wow, Pandora's box just opened up because we can do anything, and we took such a fucking leap, dude. In that week that we played the show, and everyone that was skeptical was like, well, now, it was like that easy. Like you're thinking it's going to take a minute because Glenn is so amazing, but everybody walked out of the show going, well, you're a better band now because we just had this unity. We were a team. We showed in that guitar solo the first night that we did shit together. No one was standing out over the other guy. It was about being a duo for the first time.
Now, how much material did you have for the second album at this time? Did you have anything?
Just those
left?
2 songs. And I wrote the opening riff to Twisted into Form, which is something else I was working on with Tim when Glenn showed up to practice one day. I was just showing Tim the echo thing, and Paul wrote that.
How much
beat.
of a contribution did Timmy have on Twisted?
Quite a bit, because like I said, the Step by Step and One Foot in Hell were really, just Paul and I, but Tim was there, I was showing it to him. Glenn was there, I was showing it to him. Tim borrowed a couple things from Glenn, like that he wrote on top of it, sort of, but rewrote it completely. It was like this whole conglomeration of those 2 particular songs. And that first riff to Twisted into Form started it. But then, like, we started immediately writing, what I think R.I.P. was starting to get written right away. Like, it just happened really fast, dude. And Infinite was like the first time that I sat with somebody when we started writing that. And that's mostly, he wrote most of the intro up until it gets heavy. And then I wrote the intro, but it was the first time that I ever had somebody that added a harmonized note to every fucking thing. And then we figured it out together. And if you really listen to the intro to Infinite itself, and just that whole upward, the ascending, it was the first time really accurate picking was introduced into Forbidden. I was able to do anything because Tim worked at shit. Dude. He wanted to make songs better. He was a craftsman. And it was like, wow.
So would you say of all the 3 guitar players, you probably worked better with Tim, or were you more seasoned at this point and ready to be a better songwriter? So both, you think?
It was a perfect storm. in that regard, it was.
I mean, with
And
no disrespect to Glenn or Rob, obviously,
no,
I'm just
no,
saying,
it's a chemistry issue.
Sure.
And what some people will say they love about Forbidden Evil and the bombasticness, which was great, and you can never discount it. Now I understand it more than I did when I was younger, and I used to be, that sounds like shit. It's what hell sloppy. Like, that doesn't matter. What it is attitude.
Sure.
So with Twisted Informed, we took this incredible leap, dude, which was almost too much for people to handle at first when they heard the material before it came out in the record. They're like, you guys have really evolved a lot. We got a lot of like, wow, those are epic songs. They weren't really, you didn't have the thrash reaction at first,
right,
by our peers and people we knew around the Bay. But some people were listening to it and coming back to us going, holy shit, man, you guys you're on your way now. So we didn't know which way it was going to blow. And Tim wrote part of everything with me. I mean, besides those two first songs, it was, like a song one of the hardest songs to put together, I think the last one was Out of Body, Out of Mind. And I had that entire middle section, but we had nothing to really go with it. It just kind of meandered. If it was all the halftime shit, I had all that, but nothing. And he worked with Paul one day and wrote his first thrashy riff.
Really?
That was like Tim's dramatic, like movie soundtracky thing, And then we put that song together from those two working on the intro and that riff, and then put my middle section. Sometimes it happens like that, just like with Glenn and Isaac Last.
Sure.
Then my middle section became the epic middle section part, and then back to that riff out that Tim wrote. So it's just that was the kind of relationship it was from, especially on that album, and because it was so new and so exciting, dude. And people were like,
and where are we at now? Timeline. Now we're talking
1989,
we're late 89.
Writing in
now.
89
for the record to be released in 90, correct?
Yeah. So we went into the studio the day of the Super Bowl when we played the 49ers with Joe Montana beat up on the Denver Broncos in 1990.
In 90, right.
So we were every time I walked in with another piece of gear, it seemed like we were scoring a touchdown because they had it up on the big screen of Fantasy.
Nice.
We were Fantasy,
Great.
So I was like,
place.
I remember walking in, life is just a fantasy. I was just like,
sure.
The mood I was in. We're making the
whole studio.
We're making our second record. The Niners are
anybody there,
but the Niners are destroying. We're making our second record.
Nice.
Me and Paul are both Niner fans. Everyone else, Raiders or Russ doesn't care. But so we had that that was the beginning of this whole experience with him. That was just like an incredibly creative time for Forbidden, because it was an exciting time where we saw ourselves, we could actually get into this arena scene. Like, it could happen, like, wow.
Who did you tour with on that record? Do you remember?
Well, after we toured with you, we went back and did the United. First we did, actually, if I remember this right, we did Europe with Sacred Reich, then we did the U.S. with you guys.
Right,
then we did
July,
U.S.
August of.
Then we did the
89.
U.S. with Sacred Reich. Sorry, I had to see that. Okay, no problem. So yeah, we did. So those are the
We're loose here. It doesn't matter.
Yeah, real life.
All loose here.
Hey, kid. So yeah, we did those 3 tours. We did this whole thing. We did the switch over, and we're about to release our first record. And that was the moment, I think, where, we felt like we were on our way. But once the record dropped and the reviews started coming back and people had a fresh look at us, and some people hadn't really heard Forbidden Evil, and it was just like it was a way, dude, we sold so many more records off Twisted Informed. I mean, it really was setting us in that direction with Debbie, with everything. And
it's usually the second record for a lot of bands where it falls into place, and you find
Wait,
your niche. And,
whoa. I just got shorter.
Oh, you just got, hey, Grub, there you get a little, there you are. Are you back?
I'm back.
Okay, he's back.
I'm back.
That's
Might be a little
chairs.
shorter.
Those are the chairs that I bought.
Fucking great chairs. So comfortable. Great for my hemorrhoids.
Yeah, right?
Why don't they call those asteroids?
I don't know. I guess because they already called those things in sky asteroids, and it wouldn't have worked. But that would have been it obviously explains everything.
We can change that.
Yeah,
we'll change the world. That's going to be what I do. Yeah, I mean, the reviews were coming back, and it was incredibly. I mean, it was really.
When was the release of Twisted again?
I believe Twisted into Form. It just recently the beginning part, maybe April. I think we had just put a
90,
post up
right?
of April of 1990. Yeah, and when we first went to Europe, it came out while we were in Europe, And we were playing shit off Twisted into Form in our set with Death Angel, who we toured with for the entire U.S. and European tour. Like, spent over almost 4 months with those guys. They were long tours, over a month each. Grueling.
Yes, they're
We're
still
kids.
grueling.
We don't care.
Then we didn't. Now we do.
But we went out there into Europe, and nobody knew those songs, but they were going over really well. And people were like, well, it's not like Forbidden Evil, but it's, So, but it wasn't until we got home from that, and then we realized, it was, we were on full page ads everywhere, Forbidden Evil and Combat did that. They did that for you guys too.
Yes, they did.
We're back page of every fucking
magazine. That's why it was a good thing to be with Combat over the other labels that you chose, because they really didn't know what to do. Those other labels, we went to Capitol after Combat, and they didn't know what to do with heavy metal.
We'll get to that story too.
Yeah,
I remember you talking about that. But yeah, so that was a first inkling. Besides being legends in our own minds that this might happen, like, wow, fucking people are really reacting good to this album. So, when we went to Europe and did that first tour, Stefan Shirazi and Mark Lee Aloha came out to see us at the Hammersmith Odeon. We took a bunch of pictures. We come home. Those end up on the cover of BAM. Violence was really upset because they got the smaller article and the big article. That was like part of that drama that we had.
Yep.
But this is the thing. With the first album and with the trajectory, again, of Violence, and Rob will tell you this to this day, and each guy, if they're all really honest about it, what happened was we felt like I said, music was going to do the talking, and once our albums came out, it did, and we really caught on fire. And with Violence, we knew in the Bay Area how fucking amazing they were, and how like they were just a blizzard of fucking energy,
brutal violence,
yeah, swirling fucking
energy. Everything. It's
not everyone. Not everyone in the United States when they were going out playing was getting it.
Yeah,
and the album had a unique vocal style with Sean, where not everyone knew how to get it.
Yeah,
but we
You're
did
right about that
because we saw it. But when we came out, we hit, and it started catching, and we were on that trajectory building upward. And so by the time we put out Twisted into Form, it took off, and. You wouldn't necessarily know it by the way Debbie was keeping us at bay. Like, she would make sure in her mind that we wouldn't ever think we were that big. Don't get a big head. Don't do this. Don't do that. Death Angel was doing killer with Act 3 too. So that tour was fucking, packed every fucking night, dude. Of that Europe and the United States. They were on their way to the arena too. They were on. Yep. But we were like, they were like a rock band to me. Death Angel was thrash, but they were rock thrash, and Forbidden Evil was like, very melodic, more of the Judas Priest Bay Area mold. I mean, we were on our way going to super melodic stuff and power metal, I guess you could say, but I hate that. But
that's what they call it over there.
Yeah, well, yeah.
That's what they
but then we were considered thrash metal. But
yes, you were.
But when you're that melodic, it's just the sky was the limit in our
sure.
mind. So. So we do this fucking tour, and it's going amazing, and this is another watershed moment, dude, and not the best way. And every fucking night is killer, but there's always like we're immature and we're doing things, and Debbie has to yell at us at time to time. And one night she just yells at us. She's all, well, that's why I never let Rick Rubin sign you guys. We're like, what? They're like, huh? What do you mean? Yeah, she was really mad. She's like, yeah, he approached me. He wanted to sign you away off Combat after Forbidden Evil. But I told him, no, they're not ready yet. And we're like, wow. And then Paul was fucking, you see steam coming out of Paul's ears. He worked with Rick later, right?
Right.
Ironically, well, this helped spawn that fucking, like I had a chance to work with the guy that works with Slayer,
Yeah.
And so, this moment right here was we're on finishing up this tour with Debbie, and we're like, what is she gonna, is she gonna try to hold us down? We didn't know, but see, knowing Debbie later, you realize that she really does have your best interest at heart, and she watched many bands crash and burn that she wasn't necessarily working with, other bands, because she worked with the big, Metallica guys loved her.
Sure, everybody
she
loved
just didn't
Debbie.
want to see us crash and burn,
right?
So she wouldn't let us party as hard as the other bands. She wouldn't let us.
Well, she had already been through that with Possessed. She'd already been through that.
Yeah, right. At that point, the Advent, right?
Right.
So she considered us like her kids. You know, I mean,
I think we were all her kids. I think everybody was. James,
yeah,
Lars, everybody that was from the scene. Gary, Rick.
Well,
Tom.
what I'm just trying to say, just from our aspect, and not to say anybody, because they were, they all were, but because we were the first band,
right?
after,
and you were managed by her, yes.
After
yes,
Possessed,
yeah.
You know, we were the first band to pull her in, and if it wasn't for Joey being persuasive and pulling the violence thing in, who knows how that all would have went. So, I mean, this is a moment where you're like, what could have been? Like, well,
sure.
At that time, you're not thinking, well, we wouldn't have done Twisted into Form.
Right.
At that time, you're thinking,
Twisted
into Form would have been way fucking better if we would have done it with him.
That's with anything, though. Destiny is destiny, and you just have to look at it.
Yeah, the detour just doesn't give you a choice. Sometimes there are.
I mean, what if I didn't join Exodus, and I never left Legacy, and Chuck Billy never came on the scene? You know what I mean?
Then both bands wouldn't have fucking developed.
I agree. So there's so much, like you said, when it tears off into another thing. There's so much of that, with that.
These are what like I keep calling them, the branches of the forbidden evil
exactly.
tree. So the fact that Rick Rubin didn't do our record, and we didn't have his influence on because what he liked about Forbidden, and you got to remember, I did a record with Rick, Man-Made God.
Man-Made God was
I sat with him.
Well, he wanted us. He was one of those labels that were where they were dangling hamburgers when other people were dangling steaks.
They're not sure where thrash metal's headed.
Right. So he had signed Slayer, and Def Jam was interested in Exodus. This was right before Pleasures of the Flesh, and that's why we went with Combat, because they were willing to.
They were with Torrid before that.
Yeah, right. That's a whole nother.
It's all
story.
in a name. Torrid.
That's a whole nother story.
But,
we'll tell sometime.
So anyway, getting to where this whole moment. Yeah. So we're finishing this tour, and our trajectory is still up. We're getting all the major magazine articles. We were definitely right there, lockstep with Death Angel to be the next two in order. It was a certainty, dude. It was a certainty as far as everyone's perception, because we all knew the scene was exploding and everything's great. But now we're going to get real. Now we're going to get to why thrash metal didn't do that. Because at this point, we're all living, and you and I and everybody's living in this fucking dream of like, you can't go wrong. It's fucking, these fucking albums are all going to get bigger and bigger. Sure. Everything's going to go
was
fucking.
That the mentality
yeah,
too.
Everyone's signing all the bands. Everybody wanted to use Michael Rosen because he produced the Forbidden album, Twisted into Form.
Right.
Like, dude, that's a great example, because this one, it jumps the shark. Because when we did the Foundations Forum, and I watched him on a panel with Alex Perry-Alice and a couple other producers who I don't even remember. They're probably other guys that were important, but not anymore. And there was, everybody just go ahead, and we offer you to drop a demo off at the producer of your choice. And fucking Rosen, because of fucking Twisted into Form, got a stack that went over his fucking head of demos, and the other guys are just sitting there, just like, I'm like, really?
Because it was the new thing.
Really? I'm like, really?
So
Twisted into
fresh.
Form? I didn't know. It's like, really? What if Rick Rubin did it? So that's our mentality. So it really kind of ruined things for us when we found that out. And fucking in metal in general was about to be hit over the head with that proverbial grunge thing, which
grunge killed.
Grunge
killed metal for a minute.
Yeah, but it's not that. See, to me, and this is what I want to get specific about, because it's not that grunge killed metal, dude. It's that something more pure came along. Because when thrash was at the beginning, it was pure. What happened was, as everybody was busy throwing their own award shows and fucking starting to think about fucking, how big they're going to be on the next album and the next ballad they're going to fucking write. That's when everybody shit the bed. And we didn't all know it until something more real came along and said, well, this grooves, this is organic,
it's raw,
this isn't trying too hard, this is humble, this is like it. So it had its moment where it just fucking wedged its way in to a consciousness where I knew it at the time, and I wasn't bitter about it. And this is part of where I fucking evolved, dude, because when I saw it happening, I was like, I didn't take it like other people. I took it like, yeah, that Alice in Chains record is fucking way cooler than what I've been listening to for the last few years. And then, you only had a band like Pantera and Sepultura when
there was only a couple
only Pantera
that really
and Sepultura
survived through that.
Well, it's because they did something that needed to be done too, and they became a little more raw and grooved, where we were all just kind of like, there's nothing wrong with what we did, dude. And I don't even want to have that perception in this whole conversation. It was great until it wasn't great, and then it was just good, and other great shit happened.
So timeline now we're twisted into form.
We're going into 1991 at this point.
And the band is...
We had not separated with Debbie yet, but we were going to, and we did. And
how long more did the band last, Craig? How long more did you guys go?
oh, we went a long, dude. We went 3 years before we put our next album out.
Right.
Distortion didn't come out until after the dark days of metal were fucking starting to, they were fully taking fold by 94 when we put that out. And, just getting to that process of finding a label.
Oh, yeah.
And all this
Nobody
shit.
was signing
But see, now
anybody at
here's
that
the thing.
time.
This is the other part of this story. So here we are. You can't skip this part, bro. Because after this whole thing happens with Debbie, after we let her go, which broke our hearts and broke her heart and made her mad, and fucking, Violence had already fired her, and she'd been kicked down twice as far as she's concerned. And, but for us, that whole Rick Rubin thing was just too much to fucking withstand. We're like, we don't even know what would have happened. We don't even know. And we were negotiating to get off of Combat. We were trying to get off of Combat, and she wouldn't really help us do it. Like, we don't, we know we could be.
How was your deal? How many albums was your deal with Combat?
I think it was a 2+1.
2+1. So it would have been Forbidden Evil, Twisted into Form, and one more.
Yeah, we didn't get the N one.
You didn't get the N1.
But we wanted off, and we bitched about it, and they let us off. They did. And we were complaining. They're like, all right, Debbie got us off, and then we basically let her go, and then all the major labels started negotiating. Things hadn't gone bad yet in rock yet. It wasn't totally done yet. Alice in Chains was out, but no one really saw the Nirvana thing yet. It hadn't really happened, right?
So we made it until 93. Exodus of Force of Habit came out in 92. It was kind of 93 where we kind of saw.
Yeah, no, and I remember following all that through. And but what happened was, and this is where Paul comes into this whole thing, and Slayer, because this moment really fucked Paul's heads up. So we started writing for the next record, and we were making demos, the Trapped demo people like to talk about, which is had My Sorrow Is My Own, Trapped, and So Dark, that acoustic thing. We were evolving into this whole other fucking thing, man. And it was more melodic, and it was more dramatic, and it was more this, that, and the other. And, the Tim's big Queensryche influence and stuff like that. And and then RCA came in and wanted to fucking take us and offered us a huge record deal, dude. For the time, it was fucking huge. We're like, holy fuck, we're going to do this. We had a different manager.
And what year was this now?
This is all 91.
This is 91.
Well, Paul's in the band. And this demo had just put us in a different league. And no one knew really besides us, because everyone was busy in their own world. And we were about to fucking do this thing. And then, so Paul landed the bombshell and quit and joined Slayer. But he didn't tell us directly. We had to find out through our manager, Bill, who helped negotiate this whole thing for Paul.